In today's live lesson, we're going to be talking about how to play with others. I'm going to be sharing some of my experiences playing with other people. As someone who's a pretty anxious player, I get anxious when performing. Playing with other people can be pretty anxiety-ridden too, and I'm going to share some of the tips and tricks that I use to help myself feel better when playing with others and to really have a good, confident, and fun experience while making music with other people. And to do this, we're going to take a look at a preview from my new album, the Baritone EP. And this is a still unnamed track. We're thinking of names, so if you think of one, feel free to leave it in the comments down below, where I got to collaborate with Kale Gamiao and Corey Fujimoto on a track, and I played my baritone ukulele for it. And I'm more of a high G ukulele player than a baritone player. Even though I just did this baritone album, I'm not a very good baritone player yet. And what I mean by that is, the chord names, I'm still thinking high G and converting them to baritone. So I feel very kind of stunted when playing with other people because for me to communicate what it is I'm playing, I have to think a little more. And that's a good way to compound some of the stress and anxiety of playing with other people, especially people as good as Corey and Kale. Now, before I talk about any of these tips and tricks, I've got 3 points I want to go through today. Let's go ahead and take a listen to this track. Now, if you're watching this as a recording, we're going to cut to a video here. And if you're watching this live, well, you're going to see it look something like this on the iPad. But it's going to sound and look something like this. Let me go ahead and bring the camera down. All right. So I'm going to click play here, and you can hear this untitled track with me and Corey and Kale. So this was a ton of fun to work out. Corey and Calais are two of my favorite musicians in the world, and being able to play with them is always an incredible honor. But it was nerve-wracking, and I have to say, them being Corey and Calais definitely made it more nerve-wracking because I still feel like a fanboy every time I hear them play, let alone get a chance to play with them. And so what I want to start with here today with today's live lesson is I want to give you 3 points for when you're playing with other people to help make it a more confident and enjoyable experience for you. The first thing I want to talk about is finding your place. So as a solo player, somebody who normally plays by himself, I kind of feel like I'm responsible to do everything all the time by myself, which means I'm always trying to add more sound. And when you play with other people, you don't have to do that. There are other people that are providing sound for you. And what that means is you need to find what your niche is within the group of people that you're playing with. And that doesn't mean you have to do the craziest, most difficult thing you're capable of doing. All that it means is you have to do something that fits within the mold that's created by the group that you're playing with. And when I realized this, it got a lot easier to play with other people because I didn't feel like I was responsible for as many things as I felt like internally I needed to be. Sometimes that means you might be playing a very basic part that creates this nice foundation for other people to do bigger and crazier things with. And that's actually what happened with this tune, with this track. I was playing with the baritone, as I mentioned before, which I've got right here. If I bring the camera down for playing it, we wrote this song in the moment and recorded it. It was a really special experience because we didn't know what we were going to record that night. We just kind of sat down and started playing. And in doing that, I knew that for me, it had to be something simple enough for me to be able to play proficiently enough with them. It wasn't them that I was worried about, it was me, and that was okay. And so what I worked out was a very basic chord line. And here's what's funny is I play this chord line for most of the song, and it's a long song. And if you listen to just this, how many times in a row could you hear this before you'd get sick of it? You know what I mean? I'm on the 3rd time playing it now, and it's starting to get almost a little bit boring. And what I mean by that is if this was all that you heard, it wouldn't be a lot. But when you have other ukuleles and guitars over the top playing this and adding harmony and other elements of complexity, suddenly this can be played for a long time and never really get boring because other people are changing. And this is what I mean by finding your place. You don't have to do something complicated. You don't have to do something really difficult. You just need to do something that fits the mold of what everyone else is doing. Maybe that's some very light picking pattern. Maybe you're doing some sort of strumming. Maybe you're doing basic chords, or maybe you're doing a little bit richer chords. Whatever it is, just find your niche, find your position to kind of fit in with all this. And you're going to find that you can have a lot more fun because the responsibility isn't all on you. Bringing the camera back up. And so early on, I kind of figured out this chord progression and went through it and found that roll and just kind of went with it. Kind of a funny story about it. There are some other chords that are played in the song where it does have some these nice little parts. And at one point, to share kind of a funny story on one of those turnarounds, I was playing this chord here, 4, 5, 5, 5, which is a really nice chord, right? Calais was playing it on high G elsewhere, Corey on the guitar. Well, this is an F sharp minor 7 flat 5. Now, I'm not saying that to scare you. It sounds scary. Listen to it. It's not that scary. But what's funny is this fingering on a high G ukulele or a low G ukulele, well, this is a B minor 7 flat 5. And that's what my brain thinks. So I was watching Calais play, and he was playing 2-2-1, or just playing, what was he playing? The 4-4, I can't remember which voicing he was doing. Oh, he was playing 2-4, 2-3, which is an F sharp minor 7 flat 5 on a high G. And I was looking at his high G and what I was playing on baritone, and my brain broke because I was thinking high G voicing to baritone back to high G. I was like, no, wait, no, you're playing an F sharp minor, I'm playing a, oh no. And it was hard. And I'm saying this because we're sitting there and we all start cracking up over the fact that I can't figure out what chord I'm playing because I'm thinking about the wrong uke to the wrong thing. And that's fine because, we were just there to make some music together. And in that particular moment, my place was trying to figure out a chord progression with them and working on it together. And that was fine. That was great. We didn't need to arrive at it perfectly the first time. We just needed to workshop, play around, and jam a little bit. And so the knowing your place doesn't just have to be what you're playing in the moment when you're actually playing, but it can also be what you're planning out as you're working on what you're arranging. Typically speaking, someone will take more of a lead with a jam. Somebody will kind of call the tune or explain how to teach the tune or whatever that might be. And if that's you in that moment, that's great, but it doesn't always have to be you. It's okay for you to sometimes take the back seat and let somebody else determine what it is you're going to play together. Finding that role within that is really important. In this particular case, my responsibility was kind of to, think of the chord progression and kind of form, while Corey and Calais were more about making the melody just beautiful and adding all these textures that I would not be nearly as good at adding. And so we each could kind of do the thing that we did well, and that's what made it such a magical experience. And so that's my first big recommendation for you, is find your place, whatever that might be when you're playing with it. It doesn't have to be a showcase of all of your abilities. You don't have to play the hardest, most difficult things when you jam with other people. Find just what fits within the niche of the group that you're playing with, and you'll have a lot more fun. The second thing that I want to talk about with this is less is more. And this is, I think, the most important part of this whole thing is when we're playing, especially as solo players, as I mentioned earlier, we kind of have to do everything ourselves, right? And man, that's stressful. That's a lot of things that are going on to do that, right? And so with that in mind, when you're playing with other people, you don't have to do very much to add a lot of texture and sound to what other people are playing. And that is a magical thing when you're playing with a group of people, because not a lot needs to happen for a big sound to be able to occur. And so in the case of this song that we were writing, if I bring the camera down again, this chord progression I wrote, as I mentioned before, is very simple, right? Well, one of the problems I had is I wanted to do something like this. And that sounds fine when playing solo, but when other people are playing with me, it can be a lot of sound. So what I ended up doing is thinking exactly this: less is more. I don't need to play as much. And I made it into more of a... This has a lot of space. And that space sounds pretty good solo, I think, actually, overall. Baritones sure sound nice, don't they? But more importantly, bring the camera back up, it sounds wonderful when you have other people filling that space. And this is the kicker to all this. If you aren't leaving space in what you're playing, the people you're playing with have nowhere to fit in. The more that you do, the less others can do. So by playing less and leaving more space in what you're playing, you create more opportunities for those that you're playing with to fill those spaces. And this is a two-way street. Sometimes you might be the one kind of laying down the initial thing and other people want to play in your space. In that case, make sure you leave plenty of space for them to play in. But other times, somebody else is going to be playing and you need to play within the spaces that they're leaving. And it's really important to not do too much. Sometimes in a song, you might do something incredibly simple and that's enough for the whole thing. And while playing solo, it might sound a little thin, but playing with a group, it can sound magical. A good example of this, bring the camera back down, is if I just played something like this. This might be a little bit thin sounding because it's only me playing. But if I actually click play on that video again, just for fun, and I kind of have it play just a bit, and I were to play this chord along with what's being done here, you'll hear it actually sounds pretty nice. Listen to this. If you can hear it. Isn't that nice? If I were trying to add more than this with it already being 3 players, there'd just be too much going on. There's not a lot of space that's taking place. But when I listen to the beginning of this, when it's just me, maybe the melody that I play could be something as simple as this, because less is more when you're trying to play with other people. The more people that are competing for sound, the more busy everything gets, the more crowded it gets, and the more it just becomes very difficult to, separate the individual parts. You want each person to kind of have their own sound as it comes through. So finding those spaces and working on them together is a really good idea to do that. When you're jamming with a friend, maybe, I've got a lot of students that'll work on like playing body surfing, for instance, one of my favorite songs on the uke. It's really cool because if I grab another ukulele here, one of them might do the strumming part of... and the other person might play the melody. But they're each doing their own separate parts. And if they tried to add more to that, if they tried to do crazy strumming up and down the neck while the other one's doing some crazy thing with the melody, it just ends up being too much. Them each doing less, and I know that doesn't seem like less, it's a very difficult song, but there could be more that's done. And by pulling back and doing a little less, you get more of an opportunity for everyone to ring out. So that's my second piece of feedback with this, is that less is more. Try to leave space in what you're playing for other people to fill, and try to listen for the spaces in what they're playing for you to be able to play along with them. So now the third point is far and away the most important one, and that's to have fun. Now, I know this sounds like a cliche, right? But there's real value in what I'm going to talk about here in a moment, right? I want you to have fun while playing with other people. And the reason for that is the biggest problem with playing with other people for most people, like for myself, is I'm so worried about making a mistake, right? We're so stressed about being the one that's the reason that things fall apart. And why do we feel that way? Well, because we don't want whoever's listening or playing along with us, right? We don't want them to be angry with us or judgy or make us feel like, we're doing something wrong. It's an awful feeling. And it's why a lot of people have anxiety playing with others. But here's the deal. If you make a mistake and you're having a blast and you laugh off that mistake, it changes the dynamic of the mistake completely. When I play with Corey and Calais, as I mentioned earlier, remember I was talking about like that F sharp minor 7 flat 5 chord, right? And how it's a B minor 7 flat 5 on this uke, and I'm looking back and forth and we're trying to work things out. We all laughed about it because my brain was broken in a kind of a funny way of like, oh man, high G, baritone, low G, what's going on here, right? But I had a big grin on my face and I was laughing at myself and the whole situation of how crazy it was, that both Corey and Calais laughed too. And we just kind of moved on. We kept playing and interacting and writing the piece of music. If I were to have, instead of reacted that way, if I got frustrated with myself for not knowing what it was that I should be playing in that moment or communicating correctly to Calais, and I started being really hard on myself or hard on the situation of like, oh man, I should know this, and just been like, I'm so sorry guys, I'm so bad at this, I shouldn't be doing this, and had some sort of shutdown like that, well, they wouldn't have reacted the same way they did as when I laughed it off, because man, that's awkward. And if people are listening to us play outwardly too, it just creates a different energy and a different vibe. And when you're playing with other people, it's really about that energy. It's about having fun and experimenting with each other to create these different sounds and find things that will probably never happen exactly in that way again. And when you add an energy of anxiety and tentativeness to that, other people will latch onto that. You want to give the energy that you want to show. And in this case, showing that you're having fun means there's no mistake too big in the world that everyone involved couldn't just laugh off and kind of have a good time with. So do not take these things seriously. You're making music. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be engaging. You're supposed to enjoy your time with other people. And in this particular case, I made a few of these little blunders and you can see the laughter. In fact, if you watch the video again, you'll see that there's a couple times we had little miscommunications where we didn't quite do the chord progression right, but Corey and Clay can pull off anything. And you'll see like a little bit of laughter happening. It's not frustration, because if one of us got frustrated in that moment, the whole thing would have fallen apart. And so it's your responsibility to have fun, not just for yourself, but for the other people you're playing with, because it's likely they are just as stressed as you are, or at least experiencing a little bit of it. And if you are laughing about it and make a mistake, you're setting an example for them to be able to laugh about it and make a mistake too. We want everyone to be at the right energy with it because it makes such a big deal. Huge shout out to my good friend and mentor, John Moen, with this. I've got a few videos performing with him. He's my favorite person to perform with because he personifies this mentality of having fun while performing and making whatever mistakes that occur while you're performing. They're just part of the experience. They're part of the performance. And it's your job as a performer to embrace them, laugh them off, and just keep going and making music. Some of my favorite moments on stage in my life have been as a mistake, because I'm playing with other people that I get to make that mistake with. We get to laugh it off and remember it forever. In a good way though, not in the scary way. So that's my third point with this, is to have fun. And I really do think it's the most important one, because it's just music. Everyone's having a great time, and the more energy you put out there of enjoying it, the more the audience and the people you're jamming with are going to receive. Makes it a good time. So those are my 3 points. The first one there is to find your place, find your niche, right? You might not be the best player in the group, and that's okay. Let the best players do their thing. You just need to find what you can do. When I jammed with Corey and Clay, I found a basic chord progression that worked really well on the baritone and could allow them to go crazy with their other instruments. Sometimes you might be the better player of the group, and by better, all that I mean is more experienced. So it might be your job to hold the chords down and make sure that people are kind of in time, and in which case, just hold the chords down. Don't worry about doing everything. I'll let other people do things too. So find your niche, find your place within the group. And when you're doing that, make sure you go to the second point, which is less is more. Keep space in there. If you're doing everything, there's no room for anyone else to do anything. So leave space in what you're playing for others to be able to fill it. And when they're playing, find the spaces in between what they're playing to play what you want to. That way you're not all over the top of each other doing the same thing, but you're all benefiting each other. You doing a little less gives a little bit more room for somebody to do a little bit more, and that's pretty magical. The third point, have fun. The energy you put out with your performance, with you jamming with other people, it's going to be infectious. And if you put out an energy of you're just having a blast and a mistake happens, who cares? It was fun, I was part of it. That makes it so that the other people, when they make a mistake, they'll have the same sort of carefree mentality that results in a much more natural and fun experience for everyone. If you have a negative attitude and you get really self-conscious and shut down, it's going to be much harder for the listeners, the other people of the jam, to be able to recover from that mistake. So give yourself the best chance you can, laugh it off, and have a great time. So these are my 3 points. There's a lot more points we could talk about with this. I was really excited to share this track with you that, again, is still unnamed. So if you have an idea, leave it in the comments down below. But I'm going to open up to any questions there might be here on chat. We do these live streams right now every second Tuesday of the month at 2 p.m. Pacific time. And so if you can catch them live here on Rock Class 101, absolutely awesome. If not, you can feel free to leave your comments down below in the chat. We'll answer those too. And with these, there's a forum post that's made every month, so you're more than welcome to ask your questions there. And I'll check that as well to make sure that all questions go answered. So let me go ahead and check real quick about any questions there might be in the chat. Let me just load up these pages here. I don't see a question from that. I'm actually not seeing any questions today, which is totally fine. If you have a question, feel free to leave it in the chat. I did get a couple questions from some private students that I wanted to answer here today with this. So if you're watching this live and have a question, feel free to leave it. But one of the questions that I got from a student is, when they're learning to play with other people, is how do I make sure I'm not, messing everything up, right? And in this particular case, it's a student of mine who's playing with their spouse. So they're playing together, which is really cool. And he wants to make sure that his rhythm is not off for his spouse to be out of time with. And so when you're learning to jam with other people, if you're both learning to jam, it can be more difficult, because the number one piece of advice I have for when you're trying to jam with people and you're trying to get good at jamming with people is jam with people better than you, because they will make you better. That's why I love jamming with Corey and Calais. I learn so much every single time when I see them, right? But if you don't have that opportunity, maybe you and a friend are of equal skill level and you haven't jammed much, that's where jamming with something like a backing track can come in handy. And a lot of times with lessons, you'll see that there's going to be opportunities where you can play with like a guitar profile or a MIDI file, or even just the recording of somebody playing the song. All of these are really good resources to be able to play along with, because ultimately, if you're learning how to jam, having something to rely on can be really helpful. And that thing to rely on could be an external performance or a recording or whatever it might be, right? Video of someone playing it, computer program playing it, whatever. But playing along, both of you with that recording, can be really helpful to get things in time, and you can gradually phase out the recording to make sure that you're being able to play in time with something that's not just another player who's also not experienced yet at jamming with others. So that was a question I want to make sure that I answered before the end today. So I don't see any questions here in the chat, which is totally fine. Just want to make sure no questions have been asked. This is a really fun concept to talk about. There's a lot more to talk about it with too. So if you'd like to see more on this subject, feel free to leave it down in the comments below. But otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thank you so much. Take it easy. Have a good one.